Night one of the NFL draft in the books, and it was what we thought it would be. Jayden Daniels is the newest quarterback of the Washington Commanders, and I promise you, if you're not excited yet, you will be.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into this episode of Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day every day. And don't forget that you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. And you can continue this conversation with me by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Commanders. Sign up today to be an insider. You'll get news, analysis, inside information, one-on-one conversations with me, and bonus content delivered straight to your phone. No hashtags, no apps, no filters, just text messages like the ones I was sending to insiders all throughout the first round of the NFL draft, and especially when Jayden Daniels was selected by the Washington Commanders. So become a Locked On Commanders insider. Join subtext.com/Locked On Commanders. I'm David Harrison, credentialed member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com, part of Sports Illustrated's FanNation, here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And as always, everydayers, I appreciate your continued support for the program. Today's episode brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. On today's episode, we are going to take a look at some day two prospects the Washington Commanders might be targeting in the second and third rounds. But first, not everybody wanted Jayden Daniels. Some wanted Drake May. Some wanted J.J. McCarthy. Some even wanted Michael Penix Jr., who goes to the Atlanta Falcons. We'll talk about some of our day one surprises as well later on in the program. But Jayden Daniels is who the Washington Commanders were looking for. He is who they targeted. He is who they are getting. And again, not necessarily a known commodity, right? Going into this thing, I think everybody pretty much on the beat. I think everybody pretty much close to the Washington Commanders tagged Jayden Daniels. I know he was pretty much my quarterback, target since late March. The guy that I thought made the most sense for the Commanders as far as what they were saying, how they were saying it, the history of Cliff Kingsbury and his offense and everything. He's got the arm talent to make it happen. I know that Jayden Daniels doesn't have the most arm talent necessarily on tape in this draft class, but he has the arm talent that this offense is going to need, that this coaching staff needs to have. Plus, he's got plus side athletic ability. Yeah, you got plenty of quarterbacks in this NFL draft who have athletic ability. And when you compare them to quarterbacks of 10, 15 years ago, all of these guys pretty much would have been maybe the most athletic quarterback of their time. But in this class specifically, Jayden Daniels' athletic ability above the board and above everybody else. And then, of course, the matchup with Cliff Kingsbury, the offense that he likes to run. There's a lot of people who still kind of give this air raid tag and say he's just going to pass. We just got done complaining all year about Sam Howell having to throw the ball 40 to 50 times every single week. That is not necessarily the way that Cliff Kingsbury is going to run these things. If the Washington Commanders can put up a lead, if the defense can hold teams off the scoreboard, Cliff Kingsbury has shown during his time as the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, he's willing and readily available to run the ball, to use screens, to use some of the short game stuff, bleed the clock, protect that lead using offensive schematics. He just needs to have that ability to do it in the first place. So that's another question that this coaching staff is going to have to answer. But obviously, again, when you look at the Cliff Kingsbury model, what he's been known to do, what he likes to do, you can see a lot of why Jayden Daniels matches and meets up with what they're going to be doing here. And then, of course, you have head coach Dan Quinn, his mentality of hiring an offensive coordinator in Cliff Kingsbury, who's hard to defeat. And that's what a lot of people have pointed to as well. You got a defensive-minded head coach. What is he going to want to look at in a quarterback? Who don't I want to have to game plan against the most out of all these quarterbacks? You got Caleb Williams up there. A lot of people have Caleb as the number one quarterback in the class. He goes number one to the Chicago Bears. But when you look at the remaining ones, which of these quarterbacks do you not want to game plan against for the next 10, 15 years? Jayden Daniels, for the most part, fits that bill. Coach Quinn hired Cliff Kingsbury in his own introductory press conference after the hiring was announced. He said, I just remember going up against him. I remember how hard it was to scheme against him. I remember how hard it was to beat his teams. That's why I hired him. Well, that's why you draft Jayden Daniels, because you know how hard it's going to be to stop him. Finally, production-wise, Jayden Daniels, the only FBS quarterback in history to pass for 12,000 yards in a career and rush for 3,000 yards in a career. We got to speak to Jayden as we traditionally do on Zoom conference following his selection. Obviously had to do some of his NFL press, had to do some of the press with the guys who are on ground there in Detroit, including our own Lake Lewis from the beat here. So hopefully you guys are catching everything the Lake is doing there. But some interesting things that Jayden had to say. One person asked him how he would describe himself and his style of play, and Jayden basically said that he was a competitor, a leader, somebody that wants to win at all costs, help the team win no matter what, because it's team first always. So he's very excited. And that is, I'm paraphrasing there, but that is, again, you listen to Adam Peters, you listen to Dan Quinn, that right there lines up with everything that they're saying, everything that they want, not only from themselves, the team, but their quarterback specifically. Jayden was also asked about the roster that he's joining. He said, quote, I'm excited to come in and get to work. I know Jahan previously, just, we were kind of around the same age. Obviously, what Terry has done at the next level, you got a great running back in Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler. Those guys are very explosive players. New additions with Zach Ertz. I'm just happy to come in and learn how to be a pro. I'm excited to get to work. I'm excited to meet my new teammates, end quote. And certainly, potentially some PR, pumping information out there. But we go back to a previous conversation we heard Jayden Daniels have on podcast with Shannon Sharp. Chad Ochocinco talked about how the Washington Commanders had dogs. They had those weapons. They had those guys that any quarterback would want to play with. Now he's here in Washington. Now he gets to do that. And obviously he's been studying up a little bit. He did also admit that during this process, the Washington Commanders never really tipped their hand too much to him, that he was kind of the target they were zeroing in on. Didn't really ever have that moment where he said, I know I'm going here without a doubt. Coming into draft night, came into draft night, just like everybody else, probably expected it to a certain level, but did not have those guarantees. There was still that nagging what if. So the fact that he already knows these weapons just kind of shows how much he's been committed to the process. I think we can put those stories of him being unhappy about the visit and all that stuff to rest. Adam Peters also talked about that a little bit too. We'll get to that here in a little bit. But then getting the word from the man himself. What do you think about this coach? What do you think about this GM, about Dan Quinn? He said DQ is a great guy. A lot of people speak highly about who he is as a person, how he cares about his players. So I was excited to be around him and the offensive staff. Their track record speaks for itself. Obviously, Cliff was over there with Kyler and what he did as a head coach. For quite some time, he had Kyler in the MVP conversation. So I was excited to be here and chop it up and talk ball with him. So high regard for Dan Quinn from the little bit that he's been able to know him as well. Maybe a little bit better of a compliment to the GM, Adam Peters. Daniel said, quote, AP, he's a dude. He's able to, coming from his lineage, obviously he was with the 49ers recently. Obviously what they do over there is tremendous, how they're competing, they're contenders. I'm very confident in him that he gets this thing changed around and just follow his lead. I think he's very confident. I'm very confident in him, and I'm excited to see what the future holds, end quote. So respect was something that Jayden Daniels talked about throughout this process, is kind of understanding where he's come from, respecting his own hurdles and everything that he's kind of had to overcome, and not being given, handed things on a silver platter, necessarily kind of having to go out there and earn everything. So then also have that appreciation and confidence in another person to say, look, I know where you come from. I know where you've built your history. I know where you're bringing to the table, and I respect that as well. It's always important for a person, if you're wanting that respect from somebody, you also got to give that respect. And that's something that Adam Peters also talked to us about. And then his message to the fans, and this is kind of where I want to add this conversation about Jayden Daniels just from night one. We are going to get to talk to him on Friday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. So if you're available and you want to look out for those streams, I'm sure the Commanders are going to be streaming that bad boy. So again, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time on Friday, we will meet with Jayden Daniels in person for the first time. His message to the fans, though, he said, quote, you're going to get somebody that's a competitor, that wants to win no matter what. And I just want to go ahead and compete. I want to help the team win football games. At some point in the future, we'll get this thing turned around, hopefully, but take it day by day. I'm willing to work and put everything out there on the line, end quote. And that is something, when you talk to people at Arizona State with Jayden Daniels, the work ethic is never in question. You talk about LSU, the work ethic is never in question. His ability to come into LSU and they say, look, these are some specific things we want to work on. We need you to get better at it. He didn't say, nah, I'm already good, or no, I already do those things. He said, okay, I'm taking that challenge. I'm going to take that coaching. We're going to get better. That's exactly what he did. That's exactly the right mentality. So again, I know not everybody loves the pick right now, but if his athleticism, his ability to get the ball downfield, his ability to execute in this offense, and that work ethic shines through, I promise you, sooner rather than later, you will get excited. What did Adam Peters have to say about his first day as a general manager during the NFL draft? That and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you are hiring for your small business, you want to find qualified professionals, quality professionals that are right for the role you're hiring for. And that is why you need to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free, but it's not just another job board. LinkedIn Jobs helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else. Even those who aren't actively searching for a new job might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking at LinkedIn, you're not looking at the right place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows as a small business owner, you can't always wear every single hat. So they're constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions. 2.5 million small businesses are using LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode of your favorite Locked On podcast is brought to you by the best meal kit service in the game, Home Chef. No more having to answer the dreaded question, what are we going to do for dinner tonight? Thanks to Home Chef and their chef-designed recipes that are delivered directly to my door, all pre-packaged, pre-portioned. They even peel the garlic cloves for you. And each recipe, one of my favorites, blackened mahi, comes with a full page of easy-to-read instructions that include customization options and pictures to guide you along the way through the step-by-step process so you don't have to ask, is that what chard looks like? I cannot recommend Home Chef enough, especially right now, because for a limited time, Home Chef is giving Locked On listeners 18 free meals, free dessert for life, and of course, free shipping on your first box if you head to homechef.com/lockedon today. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 18 free meals and free dessert for life. Yes, you heard that right. Homechef.com/lockedon. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert.
Thanks again for making Locked On Commanders your first listener, first view today and every day. Make sure you come back tomorrow. We are going to drop a bonus episode on Friday night, Saturday morning. It's about 1:30 in the morning here, Friday morning when we're doing this. So depending on what time everything ends, we'll be getting a bonus episode out to cover the day 2 action. And then come back Monday for our entire 3-day recap and reaction to the entire NFL draft class. In the meantime, make sure you check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 live streaming sports channel on YouTube. Moving on with today's conversation, we got time to sit down with General Manager Adam Peters following his first day of NFL draft as a general manager. And you got to ask right off the bat, right? Why Jayden Daniels? What at the end of the day, what was it that made Jayden Daniels the pick for the Washington Commanders? And he started off very, a little bit tongue in cheek, but very bluntly, why not Jayden, right? And he said that Jayden, quote, to us, he's very special in every way on the field. Off the field, just talked to him a couple times, told him the kind of guy I told you guys the other day. Didn't really watch a lot of the quarterbacks before the season because the 49ers weren't looking for quarterbacks. And when the first time I turned on Jayden's tape, couldn't believe it. I honestly couldn't believe how good he was, and I saw him on the television, end quote. So also talked about his highlights, just playing as a quarterback, how good he is, the way he can process on the field, goes through his reads. And I know there are some things on Jayden Daniels that maybe he comes off of his first read, goes into running too quickly. Well, that's something that actually Adam Peters talked about as well, is just being a very decisive quarterback. And these are kind of the nuances that maybe we don't get to see on tape all the time. You got to talk to the guy and say, okay, what are you doing here on this play? And when you listen to any player who's going through this draft process, they always tell you when they meet with a team, whether it's in Indianapolis at the scouting combine, Mobile at the Senior Bowl, during a top 30 visit, whatever it is, they like to bring up plays or draw up plays on the whiteboard and say, okay, what do you do in this situation? What's going through your mind, especially the quarterback, right? What are you looking at? And to you and me and maybe somebody else looks like a guy who comes off of his read too quickly and decides to run instead of being patient. Maybe it's just a quarterback who's just very decisive. Pre-snap read says, I already know read number, 2 is likely not going to be there. I may not have time to get to read number 3. If read number 1 is not there, depending on what's going on around him in the pocket, need to make that split decision, need to get into action instead of waiting for something to happen, get out, make that play. And Adam Peters pointed to several opportunities, several times on tape where you would watch the defenders try to get around the quarterback, try to get to the quarterback, and they think they got a beat on him. And the next thing you know, Jayden Daniels squirting out of the pocket, heading down the field. He also praised his ability to take a hit, which you don't want your quarterback to get hit a whole lot, but his ability to stand up to the pressure, take the punishment that a quarterback is going to take, because none of them are going to stay clean every single game, every single down, but also be able to get back up and get back into it. And then called him the best deep ball thrower in the NFL draft. So that all comes before you watch the run game, right? Adam Peters talked about the run game, and I like the way he said it. He said it kind of, this is a quote, it kind of takes your soul as a defense, end quote. And I think that, again, when you talk about game changers, right? Every quarterback throws the football. Every quarterback, I don't say every quarterback can run, because not every quarterback can run, but the quarterbacks that can run, like you have kind of just this the middle ground of how well a quarterback can or can't run, but not every quarterback can just deflate you, right? And that's something that makes Patrick Mahomes really so special. That's something that makes Lamar Jackson really special especially when he's clicking on all cylinders, is they do things. They turn a 3rd and 16 into a first down, or a 2nd and 15 that looks like it's about to be a sack, or even a 2nd and 4 that looks like it's about to be a sack, into a 15-yard gain by either taking off, extending the play, finding an open receiver, whatever it is they do. They just do things that, yes, they got a first down, and 32 other quarterbacks in the NFL can pick up a first down, whether it's through the air or with their legs. But the way they did it, the context they did it in, the situation they did it in, it just does a little something extra, where it's not just the yardage, it's not just 5 yards, right? The value of that 5 yards, or that 10 or that 20 yards that quarterback helped get, it's just different. And like you said, it deflates it. It takes your soul. And I think that's a really good way of putting it. And those are the types of plays that are going to help a team win a game. Kind of to make an NBA reference, kind of look at the Denver Nuggets, what they do to the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers think they're in it. They got control. And the Denver Nuggets always find a way. They're a special team to just come in there, do something that just deflates everybody. And now, I mean, again, I don't know if you're an NBA fan, but Lakers down 3-0. Pretty much everybody's deflated at this point. So they always talk about his character, right? And again, you talk about the journey that Jayden Daniels has come through and some of the things he's had to do. And Adam Peters really emphasized the fact that Jayden has never been handed anything in his life. He always wants to come in. And he always wants to earn something. I've had a lot of questions from people asking me, if Jayden Daniels is the pick, is he the starter right away? And I will tell you this, that I think that we are going to expect him to be the starter. I think the fan base is going to. I think the media, we're going to talk about him like he's the starter. But I do think this coaching staff, I think this organization is going to make him prove that he's ready and willing, or not willing, but ready and capable of leading this organization before they just hand over the keys. I do think that there is a window here where if Jayden doesn't come prepared, it's not so much that they're going to, make this a 1-for-1 battle. You get first team reps, then Marcus gets first team reps. But I just think there is a window here that if Jayden comes in and doesn't show that he's ready, doesn't show that he's mature, doesn't show that he's studying, picking up the offense, doing all these things, that there is a window there where they say, look, dude, you're not delivering on your part of this promise, right? Because this is a two-way street. This isn't just you're the number 2 overall pick. Here's your job. Here's your office. Here's your limo service. You know what I mean? Like, you got to go earn all these other perks. The paycheck comes with the contract. Got it. But you got to go earn everything else. And I think this coaching staff is going to do that. But if the leadership, the character that he's known for, and when, again, Arizona State, LSU, they talked about talking to people back from high school. I've never gone that deep, so I don't know of those conversations. But Adam Peters talked about that. Should not be a problem. Should certainly be a guy that's going to come in and he's going to earn everything that he's ever gotten. So Adam Peters obviously also asked about trading. Did say they'd work the phones. They made a couple of phone calls in the first round. Didn't say specifically with who they're never going to. Didn't say specifically which spots they're never going to. But did acknowledge that, yes, they made some phone calls. Did look to get back in the end of the first round. Just whether it was a player that they were looking for, it wasn't there, or was already gone, or just the deal itself, just whatever it was, never materialized. So for anybody out there scratching their head saying, hey, why didn't they trade back into the first round? Honestly, it kind of emulates my Locked On NFL mock draft special, where I was on the phone with like 6-7 different teams trying to get back into the first round, and just didn't work out. You know what I mean? It takes 2 people to strike up a deal. So unfortunately, they weren't able to strike up that deal. So, a lot there. Adam was asked about his reactions to all the negativity coming from the quarterback visits and the top 30 visits all at one time. So they've never really registered. The rumors of Jayden Daniels not maybe wanting to play for Washington, Adam Peters said that never really registered on his radar, not something that he was ever really worried about. And they're looking forward to day 2. They got 5 picks right now, 3 in the third round, 2 in the second round. So we're going to pick up here in just a second. We're going to look at the best prospects remaining heading into day 2 and some surprises from the first round of the NFL draft around the league. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you by Monopoly Go. We have all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime. The scoreboard is not looking good. You're feeling low. You're not sure if you, your team, anybody can pull out a win. That's when you got to dig deep. You got to lift your head up. You got to say to yourself, it's time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, take as much of my friend's money as I possibly can. We're not talking about real life here, though. We're talking about Monopoly Go, the smash hit mobile game that lets you compete with your friends and get the most riches and build the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but it's on your phone anytime, anywhere with new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much you can do. Play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards. Make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball. Charge other players rent for your iconic properties, and you can even work with your friends to crack open community chests in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders. Thanks again for making Locked On Commanders your first listener, your first view today and every day. Let's look at some of the top prospects, not receiver prospects. Some are receivers, but let's look at some of the top prospects still available in the NFL draft as we get ready to roll into day two. The Washington Commanders, again, have 2 picks in the second round. So some of these guys certainly potentially could be there. The top guy on the NFL.com's prospect list, Cooper DeJean, cornerback out of Iowa. Personally, I thought he was going to go to the San Francisco 49ers when they came on the clock there at the end of the first round. They end up going with Ricky Pearsall out of Florida, the wide receiver who was in Florida by way of Arizona State. So a very Arizona State focused day here on day one. You got Pearsall, you got Jayden Daniels coming to Washington. And to me, guys, the selection of Ricky Pearsall signals for the San Francisco 49ers that the trade possibilities for Brandon Aiyuk, very, very real. And if those trade possibilities just got more real, the Washington Commanders got, I don't know if every team has, I don't know what every team's second day draft capital stockpile looks like. But remember, Adam Peters called his draft pick stockpile ammo at one point in time. And you don't use the word ammo unless you plan on doing something with it and affecting some things. Trading for Brandon Aiyuk would certainly be effective and do some things. And of course, Brandon Aiyuk and Jayden Daniels have that history back from Arizona State together. I actually asked Jayden Daniels about some of his former teammates who are in the NFL, and he told us that he speaks to Brandon Aiyuk sometimes 3 times a day. They were just on a live stream before the NFL draft, in fact. So, that's somebody that he's got a really good connection with. If you want to help out your rookie quarterback, you go out there, you get him a guy that he's already been talking to. He's already looked as kind of a friend and mentor. You go make that deal with San Francisco 49ers. You bring in Brandon Aiyuk. That could be a way to spend some of that day 2 draft capital. The rumor is that the San Francisco 49ers want a first-round pick. But look, you may want it. You just may not get it. The Washington Commanders may have to give up a couple of day 2 picks, maybe this year, maybe a couple of picks next year. Whatever it is, I think you have to go out there, see if you can get a reasonable deal done to bring him in. On top of Cooper DeJean, talking about prospects now, back to the actual NFL draft prospects. Jayden Newton out of Illinois, defensive tackle, is a really interesting one because ESPN's analytics actually has, if the Washington Commanders continue to pick number 36 in the second round here, Cooper DeJean is actually the player they give the highest percentage of being drafted by the Washington Commanders, but he also has the highest percentage by another team picking before Washington, which means he would probably be off the board. So would Kool-Aid McKinstry, who's second on that number. Third on that number, on that analysis of who the likely pick would be, is Jayden Newton out of Illinois. And this is a defensive tackle who, to me, kind of reminds me a little bit of Kalijah Kancey, who came out of Pitt last year, ended up with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, was listed as a defensive tackle, ended up playing more DN 3 tech in Tampa Bay's odd front defense. So if you draft a guy like Jayden Newton, you've got Jonathan Allen, you got Daron Payne, you got Dorrance Armstrong, Cleveland Farrell. Really what you start looking at is a defense that is going to be really, really multiple. And basically, we just got dudes that we're going to find out how we best match up against what you're trying to do offensively, and we're going to use these guys to the best of our ability. So Jayden Newton's an interesting person. I haven't really thought about him going to the Washington Commanders, but he's certainly on that list according to these analytics. A.D. Mitchell out of Texas, if they want to go receiver. Ladd McConkey out of Georgia. Marshawn Kneeland, the edge rusher, I think is probably one of those top targets as well. And with a lot of tackles off the board, a guy like Roger Rosengarten out of Washington. And of course, you have Patrick Paul out of Houston, the brother of Chris Paul. That's going to be a guy to watch on day 2 as well. So some interesting prospects available for day 2 for the Washington Commanders. Day 1, I think the biggest surprise from day 1 around the NFL has to be the Atlanta Falcons picking Michael Penix Jr., the quarterback out of Washington at number 8. Just doesn't make a lot of sense for multiple reasons. They bring in a veteran quarterback, Kirk Cousins, pay him big, big money. You look like you're in win now mode. You go out there, you make a draft pick that's all about the future. And it's not even about next year's future. It's about maybe 3 years down the road future. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Kind of reminds you of when the Green Bay Packers took Jordan Love. And maybe the GM there in Atlanta is thinking, well, you know what? That GM is looking pretty smart now in Green Bay, but it's not really quite the same situation. You didn't bring in Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay on a contract, on a fat contract of that, and then draft his replacement. Aaron Rodgers had been there obviously for a while before they got that done. So that to me was the biggest surprise. We'll see, right? I mean, April 2024, it looks a little bit dumb. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to be a little bit blunt here. It looks a little bit dumb. April of 2026, 27 may not look so bad. So interesting day one. It's about 1:40 in the morning. We're going to wrap this thing up here. I'm going to get this published for you as soon as I possibly can. But we will be back out here in Ashburn tomorrow for another day of NFL draft. We will be back Friday night, Saturday morning to do this again on Locked On Commanders. So until then, if you got questions or comments, just throw them down in the YouTube comment section or text me directly if you're an insider. If you're not, become one by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Don't forget, check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 live streaming sports channel on YouTube. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day, everydayers. Thanks for coming through on a regular basis like you do. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I'll see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.